Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It's a joy to be with you today. We're streaming on AM 950 Radio.com and on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Please like and subscribe and click that button so that you can be notified when we come up live. The Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. And on Facebook, we're streaming there on the Santita Jackson and Friends page, the Santita Jackson and Friends page. That's the only place you can get me, and Reverend Jesse Jackson's page. Decided to share it with him too. I'm on X at Santita J. We're streaming there as well. We've got a couple of really important topics to talk about as we were commemorating yesterday the 56th anniversary of the murder of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. I don't like to call it an assassination because that sanitizes it, distances you from it. It was a murder, and he's been gone 56 years, but he is more present today than he was when he was walking the earth. God bless you, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. Let's talk about, in the second hour, what's happening with Kamala Harris, the vice president. It seems that she is no longer the liability that everybody's been saying that she was over the past 3 years. Indeed, she's been detailed to do the tough parts, to go to the communities that the president's having the toughest time in, that he's really struggling to hold on to. The black community, the Arab community, black colleges. They're all calling for her. So what does this mean? Will she be able to save these votes for him? We will see. Certainly, we're going to talk about it in the second hour. But let's talk about what has happened with these AIDS workers. More than 200 AIDS workers have been killed in Gaza. We've had more than 100 journalists killed trying to cover the story in Gaza. What is happening? And when you hear the horrors of what happened with these workers, I mean, many of us with this World Central Kitchen, you think of Jose Andres, and he's one of these celebrity chefs. If you look at the Food Network, of course, I watch it. I've started cooking as a result of it. And, you see him, and he has access. Everyone in the world wants him. He can make some of the most exquisite and most expensive meals on earth. And yet, at this point in his life, he's turned his attention to giving food to those who are most in need of food. And so this World Central Kitchen has this American-born charity has grown to be one of the biggest in the world. And yet 7 of the workers were killed in the most horrific way. And I don't think that we can adequately convey what happened to them. Haaretz said that they were bombed 3 times, but Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com is going to tell us, really, he's their news editor. He's going to tell us just exactly how this happened, Alex Nelson, if not now. I think Alex said it's important to hear, not that they were just bombed 3 times, but just how it happened. Attorney Robert Patillo, of course, national leadership team of Rainbow Push, running for judge in Atlanta, one of the nation's foremost civil rights lawyers and defense lawyers. So we're starting with you, Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. If you want to get some of the best news on the military-industrial complex, and if you really want to be inspired to do something with information that they make so accessible to you, go to antiwar.com. They deserve your support, and they really deserve your attention. Of course, you host Anti-War News with Dave DeCamp. It's a daily roundup of all the things that we need to know. And first, how can we get your daily roundup?
Yeah, so my show, thanks for the nice intro, by the way. That was very kind. My show, it's called Anti-War News, and it's basically what I do as the news editor there is I cover all the top U.S. foreign policy news stories of the day from our, anti-war perspective and try to filter out the propaganda. Try to figure out the truth. And my show, you could listen to it. You could watch it on YouTube, or you could listen to it basically wherever you listen to podcasts. It's out there, and it's 5 days a week. So that's where people can find me.
Well, please forgive me, because your greatest role in life is being a father.
Mm-hmm.
indeed. How old are your babies?
I have a 7-month-old and my other son's about 2.5.
So I know it must mean something to you. It must hit you in a particular way when you see that babies have been targeted, when you see mothers have been targeted, when you see we've lost, not lost, these people have been targeted. I mean, there was a doctor, I was reading a Guardian article, and I thank you for directing me there. I read as much as I can, but sometimes you miss things. That these children, Alex Nelson and attorney Robert Patillo, the snipers have targeted their heads.
Mm.
And I can tell you on, as they say in the Black church, on Christian experience, that is true. I was vacationing with some friends some years ago out east. I'll just make it broad because I don't want to put anyone on Front Street. And one of the guests that weekend was a young man from Israel who, of course, because it's mandatory, he had served in the military and he was very enthusiastic about it. And while I have my feelings about what's happening in Israel, he was a lovely man. And let's have a nice weekend, right? Shall we? But what was disturbing was we were out one night on the water, beautiful, right on the ocean. And he said, let me show you something. Because on the other side of the shore, there was a party going on, a few miles down the shore. And he stood there and he said, I could shoot everybody on who's standing there right now. He said, I'm that accurate.
Wow.
And my friend looked at me because I think he was coming for us with some food and we were going to sit down. And I was horrified. I mean, Alex and Robert, Dave, I was horrified. I didn't know what to do with that. And generally I have a poker face because I've been trained to do that. Didn't know what to do with that. But just kind of absent myself, sit down and gather myself because I'd never heard someone in my presence, someone I was standing this close to, I mean, literally shoulder to shoulder, tell me in such a cold way how he could kill someone. But I think that's what they call moral injury. I've had Matthew Ho on the show many times. And, you know, Mother's Day was originally Mother's Day for Peace. And so Elizabeth Ward Howe said, in her Mother's Day poem for peace, she said, I'm not going to send, I'm calling for all mothers to end all wars for all time. Because I'm not going to send my child, and I know you're not going to send your child after we've taught them to be good people, after we've given them all this religious training. I'm not going to teach them, send them to you so they can unlearn this. And you can damage them. Help me to understand, because you wrote about this convoy of 7 persons being bombed 3 times. Would you explain that so that people can understand just what happened here, that this was not an accident, that this was purposeful?
Yeah, so that is the story that we're hearing from Israeli officials is that this was an accident. And the truth of what happened, you know, I got this from Israeli media. This isn't a secret. This is what they're reporting in Israel. So these World Central Kitchen workers, they were in 3 separate cars that were clearly marked with their logo, and they escorted an aid truck to a warehouse in central Gaza, and this was all pre-approved by the IDF, by the Israeli military. And they left this aid truck at the warehouse, and then on their way back is when they were hit. And so the story from Israeli media is that they claim to have seen an armed man on the food aid truck, and they said he was a suspected terrorist, which means they have no idea who he was. Likely it was somebody guarding the food truck because things have been looted as people are in such a desperate situation. And Israel has been targeting Gaza's police force that was responsible for protecting aid. They've been killing them. So the fact that somebody might have had a rifle on a food aid truck, that's not a reason to bomb it, of course. Even if, you know, who knows what the real story is there. But the important point here is that these 3 cars with the World Central Kitchen workers then left. And on their way back, again, along this pre-approved route, one of the cars was hit with a Israeli missile from a drone. Now, the second car picked up the wounded survivors from that car. and then that car was hit with another missile, and then the third car went back and got them in, and then they finished the job. They took them all out. All 7 of them were killed. And
So
this
wait a minute. I just
Mhm.
want to get this straight. It was a convoy of 3 cars, and the first car was hit, so the other 2 cars stopped, and the second car picked up the survivors so they could get them to safety and to some relief. Then the second car was hit with those survivors. And so then the third car said, okay, we're going to pick them up. And then they hit the third car.
Mm.
So I just want to make sure that did everyone get that, Alex, Robert?
Mhm.
Okay. I just, because I don't think that's being adequately explained
Mhm.
in corporate media. We hear that, 7 people were killed. We don't hear that they were desperately trying to rescue each other. And each time they rescued a group, they were bombed. And then the next group was bombed. So when Haaretz reports that they were bombed 3 times, that's what happened.
Yeah. Again, yeah, this is basically the official story that's coming out of Israel, and they're still trying to claim somehow that this was an accident. And this has been going on all along in Gaza. The reason why this is getting attention is because they killed foreigners. They killed 7 people. I know 3 of them were from the UK. There was 1 American, dual American Canadian citizen, someone from Poland, Australia, and then 1 Palestinian that was with them. So, and as you mentioned, hundreds of aid workers for UNRWA, the Palestinian Relief Agency, have been killed. They've been getting killed this whole time. So this isn't anything new, really, but this is just, I think, waking a lot more people up. It's just getting more attention. That's just the nature of it. Unfortunately for the Palestinians, most people don't seem to care when they're getting killed, but when you have some Americans and people from the UK, it gets more attention. But again, this is just, we've seen this conduct throughout this genocidal war that's happening in Gaza. We just recently, there was a video of a drone strike. There was 4 unarmed Palestinian men who were walking. 1 missile hit them, 2 survived, and then they picked them off with, similar thing. They picked them off until they were all dead. And the last guy they killed, you saw him trying to stumble away, and eventually he was crawling away, and then they hit him with the missile. So imagine what the video of this strike on these aid workers looks like. I mean, if that ever comes out, I think that would be a huge, have a huge impact, I think.
Do you think Israelis know how this is settling in on people when we find out the details?
I mean, I think so. It seems like, I think in the long term, when it comes to U.S. support for Israel, that Israel's in trouble. Unfortunately, right now we have this president that's all in no matter what they do. But I think in the long term, you see among young people, it doesn't even really matter their political persuasion. They're very much more critical of Israel. I think maybe that's one of the reasons why we're seeing them do such reckless things. Like they bombed Iran's consulate in Syria the other day. It seems like they're clearly trying to provoke a major war in hopes that the U.S. gets directly involved. It might be kind of a desperate effort here as they see their future. They're not going to get this unconditional support that they've always had.
So tell me, what has been, so the world, so the World Central Kitchen, they've ceased all activity there for now.
Mm-hmm.
What else has ceased? What has been the fallout of this?
Well, this is what I think was the purpose, because Israel has had this starvation blockade on Gaza, essentially, and they've been restricting aid. And now, since they bombed the World Central Kitchen, they suspended operations. I believe the World Food Program has also suspended operations in Gaza and some other groups. So what little aid was getting in is being cut off because of this. And I think this is by design. I think it's very clear. You have the U.S. covering for them, saying, "Oh, they're letting we've gotten more aid in," and they're doing all these crazy things like dropping aid, airdrops, and saying they're going to build a port. When the easiest thing to do would be to open the border crossings. There's thousands of trucks lined up, ready to go in. This is what they got to do, but instead they're thinking of all these crazy schemes as a way to act like they're doing something when, the thing to do is to cut off Israel and end this madness.
And a lot of Israelis are blocking the trucks from getting in. Is that not true?
Yeah, that's at the Kerem Shalom crossing, the one that they've opened into Gaza. There has been all these protests and yeah, people blocking the aid, trying to block the aid trucks. And this is in coordination with the Israeli police. The head of the Israeli police, Itamar Ben Gvir, he's the national security minister. I mean, he's about as extreme as you get when it comes to Israeli politics, openly supporting terrorist attacks against Palestinians in the past, and he wants them to starve. He's been very clear and open about that.
Well, what is going on? I mean, The Guardian has a headline, "Not a Normal War." And when you read the article, it's stunning. There's a doctor going through the hospital asking about the injuries to these children. Not injuries, they've been shot. And each one of these children have been shot in the head. What?
I mean, yeah, and that's with sniper fire. I mean, what's the excuse there? You're looking through a sniper scope and you see a child and you shoot him in the head. And this has been a war against children the whole time. I mean, it's staggering. Basically the official number is 14,500 children have been killed in the bombing, and that's considered a low estimate because there's all these people trapped under the rubble or dead under the rubble, thousands of people. And and this is something you mentioned, my kids. I mean, this is something that really hits home, especially when I read about the Palestinian women, the pregnancies being terminated, them losing their babies, the stillbirths, the newborns not being able to survive, because that's something, it's tough to put yourself in their shoes. But when you think about kids, I mean, having a kid for me, and I'm the father, I'm not the one, giving birth, going to the hospital and like my wife had a C-section last time. It's stressful and scary enough as it is. Like, I just cannot, adding all those other things on top of it is just so horrific to think about. Women getting C-sections without any sort of anesthesia or drugs. I mean, those things are happening. Kids getting surgery without any. I mean, it's horrific beyond words. And, it's just, there's so much to say about it, but sometimes it's hard to really find the words.
But it has not stopped. I mean, and now, even with, CNN, it has been documented that you cannot get a story out to us from Israel unless the government approves it, and IDF. I mean, that's so. I mean, one wonders, what can one believe, because the independent journalists, are being killed. I mean, how are we going to get the story? How do we even get this one?
It's mostly doctors. They've kind of become the journalists. It's foreign volunteers who go into Gaza and work in the hospitals, and then they come out and they say what they saw. And again, it's just horrific. One thing, a British doctor, I forget his name, but he recently gave testimony. He said just one anecdote. And I mean, these are the most horrific stories that you read. Just a story of a Gaza hospital. And the hospitals have been attacked systematically. They're purposely destroying their hospitals. But this one story that really stuck with me, this British doctor said there was a little girl who she was going to die of her wounds. It was very clear. But they didn't have any morphine to give her. They didn't have anything to give her to ease the pain. They didn't have a bed to put her in. So she just died in the hospital floor in the waiting room, just screaming in agony. I mean, how are we allowing this to happen? It's just in 2024. It's just really unbelievable.
In our name, with our money, with our weapons. Alex Nelson, because you have been fighting this with all of your might. I mean, and this hits you in a particular way because you're Jewish, and many of our Jewish brothers and sisters and Arab brothers and sisters have family who are living there. When we see Rashida Tlaib, the congresswoman from Detroit, what is lost, I think, on many Americans, at the very least, Attorney Robert Patillo and Dave DeCamp of antiwar.com, is that her grandmother is there. I just buried both my grandmothers within the past 10 years. If there was a big storm that came through South Carolina where my grandmother Helen lived, I was on the phone. Grandma, because she didn't want to leave South Carolina for anything. She wasn't going to leave. My other grandmother lived in Washington. There was a storm. Is she okay? I cannot imagine. I can't even imagine having my grandmother or grandfather or relatives, loved ones living in that part of the world. You know, the West Bank, or Gaza, or quite frankly, Israel. Because you don't know what people will do. Because folks can do any and everything. And it's, what do you make of this story? Let's just start there.
Thank you, Santita, for having me back on the show. It's a very heavy topic. So I'm grateful to be invited back. But of course, there's an air of solemnness about, this discussion. I think it's just absolutely horrifying and appalling. I don't actually have any family in Israel, so I cannot speak to that. But I do know that it's a small world. We are in the 21st century. We all have phones. Fiber optic cables are running under the ocean, so we've got this instant connectivity. We're seeing images and footage coming out from from Gaza, as it happens, basically. I think the World Central Kitchen, the deaths of these 7 aid workers, is going to be a pretty seminal moment. I would like it to be a turning point. I'm not confident it will be, because frankly, our president, whatever he might say to Netanyahu on the phone, as long as he's going to continue writing checks and as long as he's going to continue sending weapons, it's all hollow rhetoric. But it's not lost on me that this World Central Kitchen news is taking sort of focus from the narrative just after we are getting reports and understanding what happened in Al-Shifa Hospital over the past couple of weeks. And for listeners who aren't aware, the Al-Shifa Hospital was the largest medical complex in Gaza. It was one of the last functioning hospitals. I don't think there are really any functioning hospitals anymore. And it was under a total siege for days. And there are reports of medical workers being kidnapped, medical workers being brought down to the basement and just murdered execution style, reports of women being raped and then executed. I mean, we're talking about medieval level of horrors and things that you would just not think would happen. And we're watching it in the modern world with modern weapons, with cameras. There are photos coming out of Al-Shifa Hospital from folks wrote their last words and their final prayers on the walls. These are devastating images and stories. And so I think while the World Central Kitchen story has sort of captivated the world, because Jose Andres is such a beloved figure globally, and he has the ears of so many people in power. And notably, he became sort of known globally for his international relief work during the Trump presidency. So he became sort of this figurehead of, we're pushing back against the right wing, we're pushing back against fascism. And then it's under a Democratic president with American bombs and American money that his aid workers are dying these horrific targeted deaths. So, I don't know where we go from here. I don't know what's going to happen next, but it is devastating. And we just need to continue to push and continue to need to do everything we can to make sure the administration has some understanding that they need to change course, because we are on a full steam ahead towards global fascism if we allow this to continue.
Well, I mean, why do you, because I can tell you as a Black American, fascism is nothing new. We've been living with it. It's just now everybody else is getting a taste. Not that I ever wanted that, because who wants that? But I mean, why do you think this tragedy has drawn so much attention, Alex? I mean, is it because they're not Palestinians, or they're not brown people? Is it because they're white? Is it because we love Jose Andres so much because he's done so many wonderful things, and so there's a touch of glamour, right, to this particular charity. What do you think it is?
I think it's a combination of the things you mentioned. And as to Dave had said earlier, they are foreign aid workers. And usually that was sort of a protected class for all intents and purposes, even in war zones. And that's not anymore. There are no rules on the table. And yeah, I think that Jose Andres is such a beloved, esteemed figure of international relief and aid relief, and the fact that his focus is on food, and it's just such this basic human need that we can all relate to. We need to eat, and he's providing food to the people that need it most. And used to be, he would go into situations that were impacted first and foremost by climate change. As I said, his sort of what's launched him into the stratosphere in our collective consciousness was when he provided relief during Hurricane Maria, which happened under Trump's presidency. And, you know, there was just no response from the Trump administration towards supporting the people in Puerto Rico. And we sort of latched onto Jose Andres and we're like, see, we're different. We're not the same. We care about people. And he became sort of a figurehead for that moment in time and that energy in time. And I think right now folks are reconciling with the fact that like the Biden administration has actually caused more harm to Jose Andres' team than the Trump administration did. And they have to reconcile what that means and what that looks like.
Attorney Robert Patillo, your reaction?
You know, I'm hoping that this is, as was said, a turning point in this conversation around the. We call it a war. It's not a war. It's a war when both parties know they are fighting. This is simply one nation that has stealth fighters and atomic bombs blowing up people with rockets and handguns. That's not the same thing as a war. It's not a near-peer adversary. Israel versus Iran would be a war. Israel versus the Arab League, you know, back in the day, that's a war. This is a genocide which is taking place, and the current numbers are, you know, nearly 35,000. I think once all the smoke is cleared, we'll probably be closer to 100,000 deaths as a result of this massacre against the Palestinian people. But we can't separate what's currently going on from the domestic politics that caused this to happen. For years, we have allowed outsized foreign interests to have influence on American politics. When we talk about the lobby that that Netanyahu and his particular faction of the Jewish government have, they've had an outsized level of power against the United States government. This is why we see people in the media who are afraid to criticize what Israel is doing currently with the fear they'll be called anti-Semitic. We saw even a conservative talking head blowhard like Candace Owens, who has made their career saying inflammatory things. She could say all the inflammatory things she wanted about Black people. She started talking about Israel. She was fired within a couple weeks. Kanye West spent years talking about crazy things about black people and other people. As soon as he started talking about Israel, he was canceled within a couple weeks, and all of his deals were taken off. And we have to start asking ourselves, who exactly is pulling the strings in the American government? When the President of the United States and the Senate Majority Leader both call on the leader of Israel to stop their massacre, to not go into Rafah, and indeed Chuck Schumer called for regime change in Israel, and it had absolutely no impact and no effect on that. Well, who exactly is in control of the relationship between the United States and Netanyahu? People understood that when Netanyahu returned to power after being indicted, after nearly being thrown out of office on multiple occasions, that he was coming back with the most far right-wing coalition in Israeli history, farther to the right than Golda Meir, farther to the right than Ben Gurion, further to the right than pretty much anyone in Israeli history. And he made it clear long before October 7th that his goal was the destruction of Gaza and the resettlement of Israelis into that territory. During the course of this conflict, he's called the Palestinian people, not Hamas, the Palestinian people, Amalek, as in they are a biblical force to be destroyed. It is very clear that Netanyahu is trying to expand the war to not simply include Hamas, but also to bring in Hezbollah, to bring in the Houthis in Yemen, and indeed to bring in Iran with the continuous targeting of Iranian assets, including the strike on Syria. Netanyahu would like nothing better than a regional war. Israel versus Lebanon versus Syria versus Jordan versus Egypt, etc., because he does not want to go back to the 1967 lines. He doesn't want to go to the 1947 lines. He wants to go to the 2000 BC lines. He wants to go to the historical kingdoms of Israel. And he said this in speeches. If you listen to his speeches in Hebrew, I have to get them translated. I don't speak Hebrew, but they are very different than the addresses he gives in English, because he's making clear his imperial aspirations within the region. He doesn't believe that Israel will truly be quote unquote safe until their neighbors are all but destroyed. And this is not a position that the American people ever signed up for. You can believe that Israel has a right to exist, as I do. You should believe Israel has the right to defend itself, as I do. You should believe that they should have territorial integrity and the ability to live without fear of terrorist attacks and rockets being launched into their territory, as I do. But you do not have to support the wholesale death and destruction of tens of thousands of people to that end. And to the point made earlier, the missiles that were used earlier are used in this strike or variants of the Hellfire missile fired from drones that the U.S. provides. These are some of the most accurate missiles in the world. They hit exactly what they are aimed at. And the concept that 3 consecutive precision-guided munitions mysteriously missed their target, Israel has made it clear that their goal at the beginning of this conflict was to allow no aid in, to cut off power, to cut off water, and to starve out the Palestinian people, no matter how many millions would die as a result of it. And we need to have the political courage in the United States of America to demand different and to put real teeth behind some of these resolutions to be introduced before the United Nations. The problem is that the opposition party in the U.S. is far further to the right than even what the current administration's position is with regards to Netanyahu. Former President Trump has made it clear. He said he would authorize the use of nuclear weapons in Gaza. He's called these people animals and said that that he would greenlight any Palestinian or Israeli action versus Palestine. So we're basically left in a Gordian knot, trying to figure out how exactly we move our way out of this. And I think that the current position of pressuring the current administration, the Biden administration, to make changes, we have to take that and redouble it. We lose all leverage when the election comes. We can't simply be scared of saying, well, we might re-elect Trump. We have to be standing on the side of right, on the side of humanity, and pressuring the Biden administration to finally cut off weapons deliveries and sales to the Israelis. And hopefully that will motivate the Israeli people to throw Netanyahu out once and for all.
Well, electorally, though, what are our options, Dave? I mean, because you've got Robert Kennedy, who's to the right of everybody. Robert Kennedy, who says that Palestinians are the most pampered refugees on earth. I'm like, how do you come up with that? And Alex, I want you to respond before you respond to that, Dave, because Robert has prompted me to listen to the translation from Hebrew to English, not the interpretation of what Netanyahu's saying. He's like, no, you need to listen to what he's saying. And I saw you vigorously shake your head in assent when he said that. What is he saying?
Well, his reference to Amalek from the Old Testament, from the Bible, I mean, he's talking about killing everybody, killing women, children, and babies. So yeah, I mean, that is important. And I know that was cited in the ICJ, South Africa's genocide case against Israel at the ICJ. I mean, it doesn't get any more clear than that. So yeah, I think that is important. And we also see, there's these Israeli media, there's a lot of leaks. It's a very leaky country when it comes to the government. On one hand, you say Netanyahu saying that, we're not trying to expel the Palestinians, we're not going to do that. But then on the other hand, in meetings, with his Likud party, he's saying that, the ultimate goal is to get these people out of there. And if they don't go, then it's clear from their actions that they're going to try to kill them and starve them all out. There's not really any debate, I don't think, about the fact that the ultimate goal here is conquering Gaza and kicking the Palestinians out or killing them. Right now, they're actually going through with that plan. They're creating what they call like a buffer zone around the border of Gaza and Israel. And according to an Israeli professor, I forget his name, it's going to take 16% of Gaza's territory. And they're doing that right now. So then what's the next step after that? You move in a little more. I think it's clear that that's what they're doing. And when it comes to our options, that's exactly what I thought. When Trump was mentioned is you got RFK Jr. I mean, he's the independent, and he is like about as bad as you can be on this issue. And it's really astonishing because I remember when he first announced and he was talking about the Ukraine war, you could tell he like knew what he was talking about. Like he was actually educated on it. So to see him, all those principles and logic and rationality just go completely out the window, and humanity just go completely out the window when he's talking about Israel and the Palestinians. I mean, it's really something.
I don't understand where it's coming from because he's so opposite everything else that he stands for.
Well, to that point, I think it's important for us to re-examine the role that the Israeli government has, or the Netanyahu faction, the Israeli government has in the U.S. government. We have people who we talk about having the senator from Jerusalem, for example. We have people who have made their entire careers on being all but sold out to Israel. Remember, Jared Kushner, the president's special envoy, very special lad, son-in-law, whatever his name is, he's already said that Gaza will make some of the most profitable beachfront property in the world once
They're
Israel
planned
conquers
for it.
them. They've
They're planned
already
for
got
that, but they're being
plans
published.
for that territory.
They-
He got $2.5 billion from the Saudis, and he's talking about building luxury condos on top of the bones of Palestinians. This goes deeper than simply this conflict. We have to re-examine our relationship with the Israeli people, because if we don't want our hands to be on those bombs that are dropping, we have to re-examine our relationship.
Well, and looking at the oil and the gas, because business Alex has gone on as usual with the United States and British companies and Israeli companies. I mean, there's billions of dollars worth of gas and oil right there.
Absolutely, there is. Yes. The fact that Gaza is geographically beautiful, right on the coast of the Mediterranean Sea, that there is oil right offshore, those are absolutely contributing factors to the larger picture at play here as to why we are committing such horrific atrocities and such, why the war crime after war crime after war crime and crime against humanity. I definitely think the moneyed interests plays a monumental role in this. I also think ignorance plays a role in this. People have been told that Israel is, a necessary element to protect Jews. I don't agree with that. I fundamentally disagree with that.
Why?
But because, first of all, because if you look at the war crimes that are happening right now, I think this only makes Jews less safe, because some people confuse Judaism and Zionism, and they assume that these acts can be attributable to, Jews globally. And I think that does make Jewish people less safe. But also that, Israel's a foreign nation. Save for one trip I took when I was much younger and much more naive, I've never been to Israel. Israel doesn't keep me safe. Israel has nothing to do with me outside of sort of my moral, my need to sort of stand against these horrible crimes against humanity. But I need my American president to keep me safe. I need my American congressman to keep me safe. I need my mayor to keep me safe. Like, these are the people that I'm electing. These are the people that my tax dollars should be, going to fund their salaries and their programs. So this idea that there's some, intrinsic attachment that I'm supposed to have to this nation halfway around the world, and that without it, I would be in harm's way is a really, it should be a debunked talking point. The problem is our president, Joe Biden, keeps saying it over and over and over again, and it's tremendously frustrating to me. It makes me feel like he's abdicating his duty as president, what he's actually supposed to do and what he's elected to do. So I think it comes from a place of tremendous ignorance. People have heard a handful of talking points when they were younger, and they've just latched on and refused to correct course. And then there are much more insidious factors who, whether it comes from a true genocidal intent against the Palestinians, or whether they're just looking at the bottom line and they want that oil and they want that real estate, the repercussions are terrible. They're catastrophic, and human lives are being lost.
And just real quick, I think geopolitically, President Biden's continuing kind of, at the end of World War II, the British had lost their empire almost completely, everything except from the mainland and Hong Kong and a few islands. They really handed off that role of global leadership to the United States of America, which is when we started expanding our military-industrial complex footprint around the globe. The reason that Israel is located where it's at was because the French and British realized it was a great way to control the Middle East. And the reason that America supports Israel right now to the same extent of the British and French did previously is because it's a great way to control the Middle East. So if America needs to bomb Iraq, Israel is a great staging ground and location to launch our aircraft from. If America needs to bomb the Houthis in Yemen, Israel is a great place to dock our ships, to resupply them, to send them through the canal, and to send long-range strikes against the Houthis. If America needs to bomb Iran, Israel is a great location to have our troops stationed, provisioned, and instead of having to send B-1s from Missouri or B-2s from Missouri on a 24-hour mission to bomb Iran, you can send them on a 3-hour mission with B-1s to go directly across the border, bomb them, and come back. So America has their geopolitical interest in the region. Because of that, we've given Israel a blank slate on anything that they do. We continue to talk about Israel as if this is 1947 or 1948. where they're the underdog. There are 6 or 8 Arab nations that outnumber them, out technology them, and they're willing to overrun them across the border at any moment. That is not the world that we live in anymore. We saw the Abraham Accords normalizing relations between Israel and United Arab Emirates and other Arab nations. We saw Saudi Arabia on the verge of normalizing relations with Israel prior to October 7th. We've seen a lessening of tensions in the region, and that makes the Netanyahu position stick out even more because it's a completely unneeded militarization of Israel unless your entire purpose is conquest. They did not build up a defensive force. You do not need stealth fighters for defense. There are 4 variants of the new F-35 Joint Strike Fighters, one of the few 5th generation fighters in the world. There's the F-35A for the Air Force, F-35B for the Marines, vertical takeoff and landing, F-35C for the Navy, that takes off from boats, and then the F-35I for Israel, because Israel gets their own specific stealth fighter that even the British, French, and our other allies don't get a hold of. That's not a defensive weapon, and we have to reevaluate this conversation we're having about how exactly we can support Israel and whether they have violated the trust of the American people and the covenant that we have with them to an extent where we have to now redraw those lines. This has to happen every few generations.
Dave DeCamp, I mean, where are we going? This is the 2024 season, and what are the questions that Americans need to be asking of these candidates? I would say not just on the presidential level, but, people are running for Congress. I mean, I was reading Axios today, and there is a Republican candidate who's being targeted by AIPAC. You typically see them targeting people on the left, but they're targeting this gentleman because he has questioned aid to Israel and on and on and on. And one has to wonder, and many people pledge allegiance, if you will, fealty to Israel before they pledge allegiance and fealty to the United States, because there's a lock, on the money. I mean, and I think we have to be very honest about that. And Alex, it imperils people. It makes people, give Jewish people a side eye, and that's not fair. I mean, it's not fair because it's not true. And, so I'm just trying to figure out what kind of conversation should we be having with 3 of the leading presidential candidates. Let's just look at them. They're so far to the right of the American public, and it's like they're afraid of Netanyahu.
I would ask Alex, because I know if not now, is kind of more involved in the activist side of things. And I think what's happening right now with Biden, he just had this big event at the Radio City Music Hall, and there's several protesters standing up and calling him Genocide Joe. And I mean, I think that's what we got to do is, if you have a Democrat representative in Congress, I've been pestering mine, tell them your position, tell them to support a ceasefire, an immediate ceasefire, none of this nonsense about a hostage deal. Just, these are the things I think putting the pressure on Democrats right now for the next 7 months is a good strategy. Because again, with the Republicans, I think that the one that you mentioned is probably Thomas Massey. He's from Kentucky. He just votes against any sort of foreign aid, military aid. He's just against it on principle. And they just smear him as an anti-Semite for that. The AIPAC, and they're funding all these ads against him just for that. And I think when people see him, he's a pretty popular congressman. When people see that, I think that might open some eyes, say that's not true. That they can see what I think a lot more people are opening their eyes to, this false narrative that criticizing Israel or being skeptical of the relationship is anti-Semitic.
Well, this is the first time we've seen this in more than 70 years, quite frankly. And but there are unintended consequences, Alex, and that's one of the things that's unsettling.
Alex? Yeah, it's incredibly unsettling. A phrase I return to again and again is when you make space for fascism abroad, you make space for fascism domestically. So if Joe Biden thinks that by kowtowing to Benjamin Netanyahu constantly, somehow that is going to keep Trump out of office, or keep the Democratic ranks, tightened and buttoned up. I don't know what he's thinking. For a myriad of reasons, I don't know what he's thinking. I think Dave is right. We do need to continue to press and to yell, to protest. I know he's coming to Chicago on Monday and folks are organizing around that. So if you're local to Chicago, please keep your eyes peeled for actions and demonstrations. I also wish the mainstream media was paying more attention to the uncommitted vote effort, which is ongoing. Wisconsin had an election earlier this week, a primary election. That is absolutely a swing state. And Wisconsin had a massive uncommitted showing. More people
from Republicans and Democrats. 12,000 Republicans, 48,000. I mean, that's big.
Yeah, it supersedes the margin by which Joe Biden beat Donald Trump in Wisconsin in 2020. So we're seeing this, it started in Michigan. It was Listen to Michigan. It continued over Cook County, which is where I am. We had a massive showing in the state of Illinois. But now Wisconsin and New York just had massive turnout for uncommitted. So there are real numbers of primary voters pressing Joe Biden saying, you have got to correct course, because a huge portion of your electorate is saying no. Like there's a clear line as to why there is this uncommitted vote. And I really wish the mainstream media was covering it more, because I think after Michigan, they kind of tapered off a little bit. I think, to pretend it's not happening, burying your head in the sand is a big running theme, I think, amongst both electeds and press in a lot of
bury the issue.
Yeah,
their heads were not buried. They were trying to bury the issue as if it's not happening.
Mm-hmm.
But it is. They're more than 500,000 uninstructed, uncommitted votes. And I think if people knew more about them, because there's not been a lot of money, and you've not had look, they have done an incredible job just getting people out, Alex. Mm-hmm. Knocking on every door, because as I understand, that's how the campaign has gone.
Yeah, they're turning people out, and I think you're right. They are trying to bury the issue, because I think they're trying to keep people who aren't super plugged into politics, who turn out to vote but otherwise don't pay too much attention. I don't think they want those folks to know that there is this undercurrent of real distress and lack of enthusiasm for Joe Biden. I think they're trying to bury that. I think they're trying to hide it. And I think it's to their detriment, because November is going to come. November is going to happen. Mm-hmm. And the fallout of this ignorance is currently unpredictable. But the best chance, both for the actual lives and well-being of Palestinians, first and foremost, but if Joe Biden wants to have even a chance of staying in office, he has got to correct course, and he has got to change his blank check policy towards Israel.
Robert Patillo, I get the sense it's not just in the Arab community. There are people for whom this is a red line all across the country. And I don't know if they're hearing. I don't know if the White House is hearing this.
The White House is absolutely hearing it, and this is part of the reason we're starting to see the pivot taking place. And for people who maybe haven't tuned into the American-Israeli situation for as long as others, just the fact that you have a sitting U.S. president criticizing Benjamin Netanyahu, that is a pivot. Having the Senate Majority Leader in the well of the Senate call on Israel for regime change to replace Netanyahu, that is a pivot. That is something we have never heard from either political party, whether it's Bill Clinton or George H.W. Bush. This is not something that we've heard in American politics. And even if you're looking at what's going on in the United Nations currently, where you have resolution after resolution calling for a ceasefire, and the U.S. blocked those resolutions for months. Now, even the U.S. is getting on board with ceasefire resolutions. Now, what is the power of a UN resolution? About the same as a piece of toilet paper. But at the same time, it is very symbolic in showing the fact that Israel has burned through almost all of their international support, and this is why I believe that the World Central Kitchen attack will be a turning point, because at this point, what are the arguments left? There's only so many times that Israel can say, well, what about October 7th? Okay, you got your pound of flesh out of there. What are you doing now? Because guess what? The attacks happened on October 7th. You started the military operation a month later. The people who fired those rockets were gone by the time you launched this military operation. So clearly you weren't trying to get the people who perpetrated the October 7th attacks. The propaganda that came out said that you had beheaded babies. Well, where are the pictures of beheaded babies? We never saw them. You have tunnels that were just full of weapons and ammunition and rockets, etc. Where are the pictures of the tunnels full of weapons and ammunition and rockets, etc.? We haven't seen those. You accuse UNRWA, the UN humanitarian group, of supporting the October 7th attacks with very little to scant evidence. And now, what exactly the justification for the murder of these aid workers and the hundreds of journalists that have died? I was on I've told you the story before, Santita, but it bears repeating. I was on Ronnie and TV, on Press TV, about a month after the attacks took place and when the military operations began. They interviewed a little boy in Gaza, a little Palestinian boy, probably 8 to 10 years old, and he spoke so clearly and so maturely. And he said, "My father was killed last week by the IDF during their bombings." He said, "In 2005, my grandfather was killed by the IDF." He said, "In 1987, my great grandfather was killed by the IDF." Do we expect that little boy to grow up to be a cab driver? Do we expect him to grow up to be a baker or a barber? No, you're creating the next generation that you're going to have to fight again. You turn that little boy into Luke Skywalker when it comes to defeating the Empire. And for every one of him, there are tens of thousands more. And we do not want this to become an existential conflict that simply goes on forever. So we're going to have to find a solution. Netanyahu has said again and again, he does not believe in a two-step solution or two-state solution. And I believe that is the reason that he is going through this, because he is a man in his 70s who has been in power for 30 years, who barely scraped together a coalition to lead this time. This is his last dance. This is Sinatra in Vegas. This is the last time the show is going to be on stage, and he believes that it is his duty and his responsibility to completely destroy the Palestinian people and resettle it with the Israeli people, and that will be his legacy for the Israeli state. And it's dependent on us, the people who fund him, who support him, and who have sway over him, to stop that from happening. Otherwise, we are just as culpable as the IDF and Netanyahu.
And we are. Dave DeCamp, the last 2 minutes belong to you. And of course, I want to remind people to go to your daily, is it a podcast, would you say?
Yeah, it's a podcast, or it's on YouTube as well.
Go to YouTube, and so you can get Anti-War News with Dave DeCamp, Anti-War News with Dave DeCamp, and support antiwar.com. They absolutely deserve and need your support. Dave DeCamp?
Yeah, I would say, just speaking of Netanyahu, we've really seen kind of a collapse of the narrative about Israel that we hear from Israel supporters here in the U.S. that, oh, if only the Palestinians weren't so crazy and irrational, they would have had their state, years ago. But what has Netanyahu been saying for the past 6 months? He's been saying, I'm the reason why there's no Palestinian state. It's because of me. And he's saying that, because he's trying to stay in power. And he's appealing to the people in this new government that he's in. And also, Netanyahu and his government, very extreme. But there is also kind of this narrative, I think, in the U.S. that Biden, you see Biden criticize Ben-Gvir and Netanyahu and all these people acting like they're sort of anomalies. And that's the reason why this is so brutal. But it's important to remember that, the majority of the Israeli population, according to polls, support what's happening in Gaza. So a new government might have put a different face on it, more sanitized face on it. But I don't think things would really change very much.
Dave DeCamp, antiwar.com, Anti-War News with Dave DeCamp every day. Go to YouTube so that you can check that out. Of course, Attorney Robert Patillo. What is your website, Attorney Robert Patillo?
People can go to elect Robert Patillo. That's ELECT, Robert, PATILLO.com. Make a donation, sign up for our mailing list, find out all about the campaign for judge here in Atlanta.
Alex, how can we contact and connect with you, and If Not Now?
If Not Now's national website is ifnotnowmovement.org, and we've got our local chapter up on all social media. So at If Not Now Chicago on Instagram, Twitter. Great way to get a hold of us.
All right, everybody. I thank you for this stirring conversation today. It's the struggle continues, and victory is certain, everybody. But you got to continue with the struggle. But we have made a pivot, as you said, Attorney Robert Patillo. We've made a pivot. But now we've got to keep on turning. To every season, turn. We have got to get justice. And I think if we can work this out in the Middle East, we can work it out all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we can. I really do. And I believe that we will. I hope that I see it from here, or certainly from the cheap seats up in the great beyond. But I know freedom and victory is going to come for everybody. There should be no losers here, everybody. There should be no losers. There should be no losers. We've got to graduate in our politics. Lonnie Guinier said we can't have I win, you lose, I win politics. Everybody's got to be able to get something. I'm from a family of 5 kids, Everybody had to get something. You might not have all gotten your way, but everybody got something so you could walk away from the table satisfied. But that's only when justice is there. That's only when love governs all things. Dave DeCamp, antiwar.com, attorney Robert Patillo, Alex Nelson, if not now Chicago, sending you all much love. Coming up in the second hour, let's talk about Kamala Harris. Will she be able to pull the black vote and the youth vote and the Arab vote and the ceasefire vote for the Biden administration? We'll see. Let's talk about it. Back with more on the Santita Jackson Show on AM 950 Radio. Back in just a moment.